Renee, if you want to do an introduction, and Jonathan, we can get started.
So thank you, Sue, and welcome everybody. Thanks for coming today, and a big thank you to our very own Jonathan Heinrichs, who he and I have been having some passionate conversations lately, and during one of them, we were talking about how to talk to people and how to have a conversation with people, especially people who maybe don't think the same way as you, and how do you engage in a conversation where you can get your points across, but not turn the person off or drive them away instantly. And Jonathan says, well, I've always wanted to do a presentation on that. And I've got lots of ideas on what you can do to kind of engage with people and have winning conversations. And so he volunteered to put a presentation together on that. And so he is here today to share his winning conversation strategies. Most of you know Jonathan, I think, pretty darn well, but Jonathan is the DFL chair for Senate District 30. And so he is in the northeastern part of Wright County, that Senate district. And it extends into Sherburne too, right? And probably maybe a little Hennepin or something along that line.
Yeah.
So anyway, welcome, Jonathan. Thank you for coming today, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Renee. Now let me make sure I get my screen share going here, and then we'll start. So thank you all for coming and listening, and I'm looking forward to hearing from all of you and getting people's feedback. Let me see here. This is, I was looking at, one of the things that we do when we talk, I was looking for a good quote to start, and Winston Churchill wound up. I always wanted to know, if any two people agree on everything, one of them is unnecessary. I was delighted to find out that that's a Winston Churchill quote. So this is the agenda, and this is it, and it should go pretty fast. It's, an introduction. We're going to go through the agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about me. We're going to talk a little bit about you. We're going to talk about them. We're going to talk about preparing for a conversation, being in a conversation, and the conversational traps, and how you know if you were successful in the conversation. So about me. I was born in Pittsburgh, and I spent most of my growing up time west of Philadelphia. My father was a Presbyterian minister. My mother taught elementary school and continues to work in Christian education. And I grew up on the East Coast. So I talk fast. And if I do disagree with you, I'm disagreeing with you. And if you're nearing the end of a sentence, I will start and I'll talk right over top of you. It saves time and it pisses off people from Minnesota. I am not at all passive aggressive. I'm just aggressive. So I spent most of my life. I've studied human dynamics, and I'm passionate about how people interact with one another. It's very important for me, and with my father's help, I started at a very young age studying human dynamics. Surprisingly enough, when you go to actually look at this, you'd think that there would be psychology and sociologists and people like that who know a lot about this, and it turns out that very little real research on how people work is done. I was shocked to find that the leading industry standard comes from the sales industry. If you want to know how to talk to somebody, read your sales books, the books on how to be an effective salesperson. The sales industry has focused in on how to craft a message and communicate with others. I was also surprised that a large amount of work in human dynamics is done by the United States military, and I greatly enjoy reading books that are written by linguists like Deborah Tannen. She wrote You Just Don't Understand Me, Talking 9 to 5, and Noam Chomsky. Yeah, these leading thinkers are brilliant in the way language is used and how we communicate with others. The leading authorities on manipulating the language happen to be attorneys, they're lawyers, and religious icons, and a politician is a lawyer who is selling access to government. So when I was 20, I went to work for a nonprofit philanthropic organization. I spent 20 years, being tortured by learning by my boss. My primary responsibilities were to do research that helped my boss give her money away. And so I helped my boss give money away for 16 years. And then I met, when I was 36, I met the love of my life. And moved to the state of Minnesota. You all know Kim. I moved here for love, but I stayed for the weather. I have a pilot's license, and I spent 4 years working at Amjet Aircraft Corporation, helping to restore vintage World War II and Cold War aircraft. And after I was done the short stint of playing around with airplanes, I would spend 20 years at Medtronic in training and organizational development, trying to build highly effective teams. And I was given an opportunity to study a lot of this content while I was there. I retired in September of 2020, and this is my new job. So that's all there is about me. So I am not a subject matter expert on anything. I do not ask anybody listening tonight to believe a word that I say. I don't want you to trust me. What I'm asking you to do is verify that everything I say to you is true and accurate. And if it's not, please let me know, because I don't want to tell people things that aren't true, right? But this is the way you employ critical thinking to make sure that what you are being told is factual and true, right? To the best of my knowledge, everything I will say tonight is true. And I am one of the few people I love to be wrong. And we'll talk about that later in the presentation. Now, about you. We want to have meaningful conversations with people, and we don't want to piss people off. So it's important to understand that you are 50% of every conversation you're in. You are holding up your end of it. It's the only 50% of the conversation that you control. You actually control 50% of the conversation. You need to look at yourself and evaluate, what your role in a conversation is. For a lot of people, they're passive listeners. They're in a conversation and they just simply listen to what the other person is saying. They have zero influence on the content. The speaker assumes that you are agreeing with them, right? So a lot of times you're listening to, crazy Uncle Curmudgeon, and he's going off, and he's actually listening to you, and you're thinking he's not all there, but he's believing, and a lot of other people in the room are believing that you believe that what he is saying is true. Silence is most often interpreted as support for the views of the speaker. If you are an active participant, you can control as much as 50%, and the risk is that everybody that's listening to that conversation is going to know who you are and what your position is, right? And that becomes an important thing. So do you really know who you are? Do you really know how you came to believe the things that you believe? You need to take these things out and examine them, because you might not be right. Most people are unaware of the influences that control their thought processes. Most people don't develop their beliefs in an orderly system. We're not built like computers where the stuff is put in file management. This stuff comes to us through our life experiences, and it frames how we see the world. We learn everything that we know from our family, our friends, school, work. Much of what we learn comes from social media or from mass media. So do you actually know who made you the way you are? So, you know, the next thing that a person needs to identify is that we all have hot button issues. All of us have things that can get our blood up. If you don't know what your hot button issues are, you got to find them and you got to write them down. You got to know what this is, because a person who you're having a conversation with will try to push those buttons. And family, they know your buttons. Whether you know it or not, family knows how to push those buttons. You know, most people who study human dynamics will try to figure out, you know, what they can say to impact their listener. So what I'd like you to do is, on your computer, your phone, take a pencil and paper. I'd like you to take about 1 minute and write down a few of your hot button issues, those things that get your blood up, what makes you upset. While you're doing that, I'll put a few examples up there for you to look at. It's a fast presentation, and that was an East Coast minute. So a New York minute goes like this. Here are some examples. You know what really pisses me off? People who are know-it-alls, environmentalists. God, you know, hugging trees, worrying about clean air and water, in spite of the fact that people are losing their jobs. There are people who are pro-life and they're pro-choice, and you can't keep those folks straight. Some people are worried about the babies. Other people want to kill the babies. And you have Democrats. Oh my God, the bleeding heart liberals. And then there are the Republicans. Oh geez, they'll do anything. They'll even storm a Capitol building. Religious fanatics. Oh, they go on and on about their Bible. And then you have the socialists, the communists, and the capitalists. There are all kinds of hot button issues, and everybody's got them. You know, and they're on both sides of the aisle. Hopefully, I hit one that you hold near and dear. It's essential that you understand your own mind. So the next question is, if you're in a conversation with somebody, are you willing to be wrong? This is kind of an important thing. I love to be wrong. Just recently, we watched a documentary called Ocean Conspiracy, Seaspiracy. If you have a chance to watch it, watch it. So I love tuna, and I'd make my tuna fish, and I have the little symbol on it that says this is dolphin safe. I'm watching this thing and realized that dolphin companies buy the right to put that label on the tuna fish can. It has nothing to do with saving the dolphins. It's, you purchase the label and they put it on your can, right? I always believed that label meant something. I am very pleased that I found out that I was wrong. And this has happened to me dozens of times. I love sending out notices to people who said, you need to check your facts on that. And then I'll back check it, find out that I believe something that was incorrect. No matter how confident you are in what you know, there's a possibility that you could be wrong. Do you accept expert opinion in lieu of practicing critical thinking? I'm going to say that again. If an expert tells you that something is the way it is and you believe they're an expert, do you actually back check to find out if what they said was true, or do we just take that on faith? We have a tendency to believe subject matter experts are telling us the truth. Do you truly think for yourself, or do you just believe that you're thinking for yourself? Most people have no ability to tell the difference. They just don't know. And so every once in a while, take out your beliefs and validate them. Back check what you think. Make sure that the current state of knowledge matches what you recall. There's no possibility that you can think about everything that you know. And Samuel Arbesman actually wrote a book, The Half-Life of Facts, Why Everything We Think We Know Has an Expiration Date, where he puts forth the fact that since a lot of what you know, you learned years and years ago, and since the knowledge is always changing, there's a very good chance that as much as 50% of the things that you would actually swear to were facts are wrong. it's an amazing thing, because as you remember things in your mind remembers things differently. And as new information comes up, facts about things change. So it's possible that 50% of what we think we know is incorrect. So here's where it gets interesting. When you tell somebody, when somebody yells at you, do you yell back at them? Have you ever been in that conversation where someone says, why are you yelling at me? And it's because you're yelling at me. A lot of times we're reactionary. Somebody yells at us, so we yell back, right? When two people are yelling at one another, it just simply guarantees that neither one's listening. We all have to stop yelling at one another. But are you strong enough to listen to somebody yell at you without getting mad at them? It takes a lot of strength to do. Just because somebody's angry at you doesn't mean that you've got to be angry at them. And control over that anger gives you control in the conversation, right? Are you strong enough to absorb the anger of others? If someone says something that you know is incorrect and you say nothing, that person's likely to believe that you accept what they're saying is true. If somebody says something to you and then you know it's incorrect and you tell them, they might get mad at you. Are you strong enough to absorb the anger of others? This is the single most important tool of having a difficult conversation with anyone, right? When somebody gets angry with you, are you strong? You must be strong enough to absorb the anger of others. The next question is, how brave are you? Are you brave enough to let the words fall out honestly? Are you brave enough to tell people the truth? Are you willing to lose valuable relationships because you told the truth? Do you remain silent sometimes when you're around some people just to keep them from knowing who you truly are? I think sometimes people do that. I think sometimes a lot of people do that. Are you brave enough to let the words fall out honestly? And so we're going to take a little bit of a break here, let you write down some notes, and there's this song that talks about this perfectly, and I'd like to take a listen, and we'll see if.
There you go.
Should I keep the
Always
song?
like-
I think the song is great. It has a really strong message that ties to what you're talking about.
Yeah, I got to figure. So evidently, when I plugged into my computer monitor, it didn't run through the screen, which was what so normally so it's a little different than when I rehearsed it. So now that we've talked about us, we've talked about what we're all about, we need to talk about the people that we're going to talk to, and that's talking about them, right? And it goes kind of like this. The first thing that you need to do is you need to seek to understand their position. Right? You can't have a conversation with somebody if you don't understand their position. So first seek to understand and then to be understood. Try to understand their position, their worldview, their beliefs, their history, their backstory. Find out how this person came to believe the things that they believe, because they just believe differently than you do, because they took a different path getting to where they are. It's very important to understand that everybody needs and deserves respect. The only way a person will open up their hearts and their minds to the ideas of others is through respect. If you want somebody to respect you, you first need to respect them. If you give respect, you get respect. This is Hanlon's razor. We've all heard this. It comes in, it's been changed in a whole lot of different ways. Never attribute malice to that which can adequately be explained by stupidity. Right? This is a philosophical razor that suggests a way of eliminating unlikely explanations for human behavior. Always assume best intentions, right? Most difficult conversations, a lot of the conversations that we have that go south on us are misunderstandings. Somebody says something that somebody takes exception to, and or somebody does something that's just stupid, and we think they did it on purpose. When people rarely lie to you about their beliefs, although it does happen, it's unusual for a person to insist that something that they believe is that they've said that's true, that they really don't believe it. For example, try this as an exercise. It's short. Write down everything that you truly believe, even though you know it's not true. Are you done yet? Never underestimate a person's ability to believe anything. I reference QAnon. The entire QAnon conspiracy is people who truly believe things that couldn't possibly be true. Anybody here ever hear of othering? Be careful of othering. Othering refers to the process whereby an individual or groups of people attribute negative characteristics to other individuals or groups of people that set them apart as representing that which they are opposed to. It's easy to demonize others, and in conversation, listen for it. You'll hear it all the time. It's words like them, they, and their, right? Just look at them. They should learn to speak English. Oh, they're all the same. It's important for us to understand that we are them and they are us. All irrational thought, or I should say most irrational thought, a great deal of irrational thought comes from persons' fear. Fox News packages it up and markets it to a mass media outlet every single day. They're selling fear, and there's a ton of people who are buying it. Listen for these words. A lot of what causes a person, to be angry comes from their fears. And it sounds like if you don't want to do something about this, if they take our guns away, they're coming to take our jobs. We can't afford to give up health care. The world is dying. They want to destroy our economy. They've declared war on Christianity. They have stolen an election. These are all things that are fair. I heard a person said they want to destroy our economy, and it was almost comical when you think about it just for a moment. Who would want to do that anyway? And these are all statements that come entirely out of fear. So what we have to do is we have to anticipate and become prepared for difficult conversations. And it goes like this. Before you're in a conversation, it's important to do a few things. Now, we've already talked about your beliefs. We've already talked about how you're going to behave in difficult conversations. You're already in a better place right now for having a difficult conversation, but we can make it better. You've thought about those things that are your strengths. These are things I know about. And I'd like you to think about your weaknesses, those topics that, my knowledge is a little sketchy. We've talked about developing respect and empathy for others. And we're in a position where we have an open mind. We're willing to learn from others, And so let's take this new approach. Let's take this new approach on a test drive. All right, let's buckle up. Let's take a look at this. So you have thought about your strengths. I want you to take a couple minutes and write down those topics, 2 or 3 topics that you know that you're comfortable talking about, those things that you're passionate about and that you know something about. That you just don't want to let those 2 or 3 topics that you just don't want to let pass when Uncle Curmudgeon goes off at 4th of July picnic, right? Now I want you to write down 3 to 5 talking points, quick sentences on each one of those topics that you can memorize. The reason you're doing this is you're priming the pump, right? So when the conversation happens, you have things that you've memorized that you can go to, that are sentences that can get the conversation going in the direction that you want the conversation to go to. You write down a couple of those conversations and you will definitely take control of your 50%. Now I need you to do the same thing for your weaknesses. I want you to write down 2 or 3 topics that you just do not want to get into a conversation about. These are topics that are very important to you, right? But you need to know what they are. You know, I'm not so strong on the environment thing. I might not really want to talk line 3, you know, but if you talk about the election being stolen, I know a little bit about that. You need to identify those topics that if you get in a conversation with, it's not going to go well for you because there's an entirely different strategy for those conversations. These topics are very valuable to you. Not being a subject matter expert is really good for you. These are the topics that you can easily concede to the other side. You lose nothing. You don't lose about them. You just give that up. This is an opportunity for you to allow the others in the conversation to take the lead. This strengthens your relationships that you have with others that you're talking with. It helps you build trust and respect because it shows that you're willing to allow your conversational partner to take the lead. So we talked about how you control your 50%. This is how you can make the other 50% of the conversation part of something that is supporting you, right? You now have the ability to control to some degree even the other part of the conversation. Now, we all know every once in a while this stuff gets out of hand and you need to have an exit strategy. All of us have been in conversations where it didn't go well, you know, and so before taking off, it's best to familiarize yourself with the location of the nearest exit. Remember that the closest exit might be behind you. Sometimes a conversation just goes south on you and you've got to escape, right? So make an exit plan. Make a plan with a girlfriend to give you a call at a certain time. You know, you've got to develop the sudden need to go to the bathroom. Say, I'm interested in hearing more about that thing, and then refer to something that they talked about before to change the subject. Do not get trapped into conceding a point that you're not willing to give up. Do not get drawn into heated arguments. Do not argue. The worst thing you can do is get in an argument. You know, but worst of all, don't remain quiet while being bludgeoned by the opposition. So many times this happens in Minnesota. Two people on the East Coast, it never has. 2 people just start yelling at each other on the East Coast. But in Minnesota, people will sit there and remain quiet while somebody just bludgeons them, with a topic that they don't agree with. If the conversation turns heated and you can't get away, the trick is to speak softer. Ask the person to walk with you. The change of pace and the change of location will allow you to change the topic. This is the way you tactfully get away. Now, the next thing you need to understand is nobody cares about your damn facts. Facts are fine, but don't waste your time. Facts don't change hearts and minds. Sad, but it's true. Stories do. Big numbers have no real impact on a listener. You could study and memorize all the facts that you want and won't help you. What's the difference between a billion and a trillion? 3 zeros. When talking global climate change, you talk ppm, it's CO2, you will lose the day. However, if you explain the loss of nearly every major coastal city in the United States, that means something to someone. We don't live in a data-oriented society. It might work with engineers and bankers, but it won't work for us. It won't change people's hearts and minds. Now, some discussions require data for reference or for impact, but use numbers sparingly and make sure that they are correct. A mistake here can ruin your credibility. All right. Be prepared to tell a story of why you think something is important. For each of your strengths, write a personal or emotional story that supports your position. For example, when talking about healthcare, tell stories about cancer patients who lose their homes, or how a widow of a heart attack victim loses her home and her husband. Stories are impactful and they solicit strong emotion. This is how you win hearts and minds. So every game's got rules. Let's get to the rules of the game. Okay. Be careful. Don't let anybody throw a red flag on you. Rule number 1, always be safe. Okay. It kind of goes like this. A buddy of mine, when I was growing up, bought a bar. He was a very fine chef, bought a restaurant and bar, and on the weekends I'd be the bouncer for him. So I'm sitting in the bar, and it's a Friday night, and there's this guy. He's been drinking for a while, and he's talking about how he lost his brother in the Vietnam War. It was very sad, and he was very upset. And his brother had been gone for a year, and he was drinking his sorrow away. I was sympathetic, and I was saying, yeah, it's a shame. We senselessly lost so many people in that war. So many young men died. And the next thing you know, the fist is coming at me, and it missed me by just an inch. I mean, it would have knocked me out. A moment later, the owner of the bar is tackling this guy and yelling at me to run away. Get out of here. It turns out the guy was saying to me, how dare you say that people who died in Vietnam lost their lives senselessly? I had, in that brief moment, made an error by suggesting that we lost so many lives senselessly. That was too much for this guy to hear. If there's any chance that you're in a conversation with an unstable person, speak softly, agree with everything that is said, and slowly move away from the conversation. Also be careful. Sometimes people will say things to try to provoke you, so that to provoke an angry response from you, so that it can justify yelling at you or even starting a fight. So always remain calm. It's an interesting trick. In difficult conversations, they can get loud. Always remain calm and speak a little softer than the other person. If you speak softer than the other person, they'll strain to hear what you're trying to say, and you'll actually acquire a more attentive listener that way. A person who remains calm and speaks softly nearly always is perceived as being in control. Never, ever shout at a person unless you need help or unless there's an emergency. Credibility is the currency of civil conversation. Never lie or allow anybody to lie to you. But lies are tricky. Some people have a very different understanding what a lie is. If a person truly believes what they're saying, is it a lie? I mean, if Donald Trump really believes that the election was stolen, is he lying when he says that there was election fraud? Then there's also this lie of omission. If I fail to tell you something that you think you need to know, I lied to you by omitting it. Another type of lie is told when the details are factually correct, but the motivation is self-serving. Always clarify what a person is telling you before you assume that they're lying. Learn to let small, unintentional mispronunciations and inaccuracies go. Calling people out on these things just make conversation unpleasant. But be careful before you accuse somebody of lying. It'll definitely make somebody angry. And as we've talked about before, most of the time it's completely unintentional. Don't allow it to get personal. Always assume incompetence before malice. Try to clarify a person's position without being accusatory, right? Always try to put distance. Use metaphor instead of you and I. You talk about things in a more abstract way. Don't talk about people. Talk about events, ideas, plans. Be careful not to insult a person by association. For example, when talking to a lawyer, don't ask, what do you call 10,000 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean? A very good start. Ha ha ha. In a difficult conversation, any attempt at humor had better be successful. So those are the rules. Stay safe, remain calm, don't yell, don't lie, don't let it get personal. So now we're ready for the conversation. All right. So there's an order to conversation, and it's very important that we understand that order. You're now ready to take on crazy Uncle Curmudgeon at the 4th of July family gathering, right? But you can't just run up to Uncle Curmudgeon and say, hey, remember last time we were talking about Second Amendment rights? I think you're full of it, right? You'll just piss people off doing that. Conversation always goes in a very orderly way, and it's very important that we know what that is. I was shocked to find out how well studied this is. So you start out with, hi, my name's Jonathan, just like we did in the show, in the presentation tonight. We're going to hear Jonathan give a presentation, right? So then what's the purpose that we all together? Well, we're all part of Wright County Indivisible, and we're here to discuss ideas and develop thoughts. Then what we do is we get into a conversation where we develop our ideas and our thoughts, and then we agree on some things, we disagree on other things, but we just simply go round and round and round in the develop, discuss, agree, and review until we reach the natural conclusion of the conversation. That order must be maintained. So at the end of the conversation, even if it didn't go your way, try to say, so Uncle Curmudgeon, what you're really trying to tell me is this, and then review. All right. And he'll say yes or not, or no, but at least you'll have an understanding. Conversations are very rarely planned, right? This is the reason why you have to choose what your strengths and weaknesses are and plan for how those conversations are going to take place, right? Rarely are serious and important conversations planned out. And, I think we'll have a really serious conversation about healthcare tomorrow night at this time. Everybody want to join me? It just doesn't happen that way. Most significant conversations drift in from other topics. For example, a healthcare conversation starts because somebody is sick. Second Amendment conversation starts because of a mass shooting that's in the news. Be prepared to guide these conversations towards one of your strengths, or use the weakness strategy that we've talked about earlier. It's very important to identify your true audience. Often, Uncle Curmudgeon isn't your true audience. Often in a heated conversation or a passionate conversation, there are passive observers present. These are people who are simply observers. They're not willing to put their dog in the fight, but they'll definitely be influenced by the outcome. In many cases, these people are picking winners and losers and will adopt the position that the person they perceive as the winner. So meaning that a lot of people wait to find out who wins an argument before they decide which side of the argument they're going to be on. Often the spectators are your true audience, right? Very often you'll be in a conversation with somebody where that other person won't budge at all, but the people who are watching are listening and learning from what you have to say. Asking questions is a terrific way of exploring how much somebody actually knows about a topic. Asking questions is a good way to get new information, but it can also give you some insight into what that other person knows or what their positions are. Do not use questions to badger another person. This is a tactic that's often used where a person will just can time. So what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And they just ask question and question, and it just muddies the water and it makes it impossible to have a reasonable conversation. Don't ask questions that have no reasonable answer. If you want to watch this done, it happens on Fox News every day. This is a tool that's often used to make subject matter experts look incompetent. I watch Tucker Carlson do it all the time. It's not particularly hard to do. In fact, it's strikingly easy. And he often is successful in making a subject matter expert look incompetent because they don't have answers to questions that are just simply unknowable. So now it's time to tell your story. If possible, always allow the other person in the conversation to talk first, right? It's very important that you are listening to what they have to say first. Seek first to understand and then to be understood. Since it's unlikely that they have not spent nearly as much time preparing for these conversations as you have, your presentation will appear to be much better crafted. Now it's time to tell the story. Clearly explain your position. Talk softly. Talk with confidence and stay on topic. Make eye contact. Stick to your prepared talking points. Don't stray from the topic. And tell your story. Tell the story in the most impactful way that you can. This will help you win hearts and minds. Now it's time to verify. Simply ask if you understand the other person's point of view. This is a very important thing. So you're constantly reviewing, and there's a lot of different ways of doing this, right? Ask the other person if do you understand what I'm saying about this? I mean, in Wyoming, if you carry a gun around, right, it's very unlikely something bad would happen, but you definitely need a gun in Wyoming. But if there's one crazy person in 1,000 and everybody on a New York subway has a gun, you're going to have a mass shooting every day. There's simply a way of making sure that a person understands your point of view. Continue in this orderly conversation until both parties get to a point where they can agree on substance. This is one of these things that's tricky. Never, ever agree to disagree. This is you have won the conversation and I'm trying to save face. This is often used by somebody who's trying to escape a conversation that they're not winning and they don't want to give up the ground. But when you agree to disagree, you allow a person to leave the conversation and dismiss everything that you said. And they're expecting that you'll do the same. Don't do this, right? Say, no, you know what? Let's just leave things the way they are and we'll talk about it the next time we get together. There's no harm in that. So we now end on a high note. At the end of a conversation, it's very important that you leave a picture of the world that's worth living in. The object of doing this isn't to create a dystopian future, but to create a world that's worth living in. So paint that picture for a person, right? End with a big picture view. So for on healthcare, say something like, I think we can get to a place where people and families don't lose their jobs and their families and everything they own because a family member got sick, right? Then continue with that conversation until the person will simply agree, because failing to get to a place like that is just something they don't want to do. So I'm going to run through conversational traps very, very quickly. There's more of these that, I mean, I could go on for days on conversational traps, but here's a few of them. All right. The Minnesota rule. Okay. I love the Minnesota rule. And that is anything that a person says is automatically wrong because the very first thing somebody does in Minnesota is our minds go to the time when that rule of thumb doesn't apply, right? It's usually windy this time of year. No, no, no. I've seen times where there was absolutely no wind for days in the springtime. I'm not politically correct. This is basically saying, I like saying whatever crap crosses my mind and I don't care who it offends, all right? It's simply everybody's politically correct. What they're trying to say is, please let me harbor the antisocial beliefs that I have and don't make me answer to them. I don't know. A lot of people at the end of a conversation will say, I don't know. This is a good answer, right? The nitpicking of details, all right? Conversational trap, you're trying to explain, well, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? You know, well, you said this, is that really true? These are the nitpicking of details, right? And the way to get out of that is very simply stay on point, stay on your talking points and say, you know, there's a lot of details that you could work out with me. You know, there's a lot of details that need to be figured out in terms of everything. And it's not necessarily difficult to see them, you know, and I appreciate you pointing them out, but let me continue with my larger point. The other one is a person who just, you know, Sandy Hook didn't happen. Nobody died there. It was all theatrical. The lie, just the bold ass lie that's meant to muddy the waters to the point where you can't, you know, make any sense of it, where no good can come of the conversation. The next one is one of my favorite, the old yeller. The old yeller is the guy that the second that is you get this person in a, you know, this is where the Karens are. Their voices get up, they start yelling, and they end reasonable conversation by turning it into a scream fest. And sometimes what they say is awfully humorous. The next one is you'll hear people say, so you think you know more about this than the experts. One of my favorites is the president and all of his cronies went around telling people that the election was stolen. And so when they asked people, was the election stolen? They said yes. Then they went on the news and said most people believe the election was stolen. Most people don't believe anything. And that has absolutely no relevance to the topic, whether most people believe it or not. I like using humor. Humor is my friend. I write jokes. I tell jokes. I tell jokes that a lot of people don't like, which means they're not particularly funny. I have to work that out. I'll get back to you on that. Be careful using humor. A lot of people use humor to deflect when they're uncomfortable. Sniping is one that I run across most often. And that's when, and this is what you're going to find in families. In the middle of Thanksgiving, somebody will say, yeah, so-and-so doesn't believe that defending yourself is okay, or something like that. Or these little, you know, conversations, these little snippish little remarks that it's hard to talk to people about. And the way you end sniping is when somebody says something that's sniping, you just say, you know, yeah, Ralph, everybody knows your opinion on that, and that will end it. He won't try it again. And I talked about never agree to disagree. Don't let it become personal. So we're coming to the end here. How do we know we've got the big win? All right. Well, I got news for you. If your goal is to bludgeon your opposition with intellectual prowess, you will lose. No one ever said, thank you for yelling at me until I changed my mind. Now that we've had this little conversation, I've completely changed my mind and I was wrong. Remember this phrase: a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. So what is winning? What does winning look like? Every time you engage people in conversation that creates a roadmap to a better future, you chip away at their dystopian worldview. All you need to do is plant the seed of hope in people's minds. They will think their way for a better tomorrow. This is the way we change hearts and minds. This is what winning looks like. So, you know you've won the day when somebody says, well, let's agree to disagree, right? Or, you know a lot more about this than I do. Well, you make some interesting points. You must live in a fantasy. I don't agree with a word you just said. Why do you know so much? Well, I just don't think that'll work. The reason these are all winning strategies is because they indicate that the person heard you. They didn't say to you, everything you just said is a lie, right? So you know that the people that you've talked to heard what you had to say, and you've moved the rock a little bit further. Anybody have any questions? Because that's pretty much. Is everybody sleeping?
No, it was very good.
Yes, it was.
Thank
Um,
you, Jonathan. It was wonderful.
Yeah. I was just going to say we're a little over time. We try to keep these to an hour, but everyone knows Jonathan and do you have a PDF or a handout you could share some of these ideas on, Jonathan? Maybe that's your next chat. Sure.
I haven't created that for this particular thing. I think Sue said that she was going to post it on YouTube, but I could, if people were interested, it would be my pleasure to actually, compile this into. Oh, thank you. To compile this into something that this is a work in progress. I created this program specifically to run it an hour, and so I'd be more than pleased to do that if people would like.
Otherwise too, once I post it on YouTube tomorrow, they will be able to see all your slides, because hopefully that should have recorded that way, but either way.
Yeah, I think a handout would be wonderful. I think people could use it. Like, I won't remember all those highlights. And I know I'm too lazy to go look at the YouTube again. Well, not too lazy, too busy is better word for it.
Oh, we heard
get out
you. We heard you.
Yeah.
See, I would really be excited to teach this in seminar form, because then you hand out things and then people actually do these exercises. There's a half dozen, there's a bunch of slides that we omit, but there's a bunch of exercises where you work together. And I actually had it written in, I talked to Renee about this, to do breakout rooms where people could practice the strategy, but I just wasn't able to make it work in terms of logistics.
Well, when you do, we can do it with breakout rooms, and we can say that, this presentation is going to be an hour and a half or 2 hours, whatever it is. We can alter or change that. So you get to work and then let us know, and we'll have you come back and we can do that.
Oh, that'd be great. What I would like to ask all of you to do is provide me feedback for where it can get better, because this is a work in progress. This is the first time I've presented this information, and I felt comfortable doing this because, part of the group, we are friends, and I knew that it would be a smaller group, and I trust what you guys say and what you think, and out all the groups that I'm involved with, and as you guys might know, there's many. This is without a doubt, one of the finest groups of individuals that I have the pleasure of working with. You guys are
Well,
doing
thank you.
really fine work.
Thank you. Jonathan, would it be okay if I sent out to people that are here tonight your email address and then they can respond to you?
Sure, I'd love that.
Okay,
That'd be great.
I'll do that.
All right, well, I think that, sticking with our attempt to keep these to an hour, we'll wrap it up, but I just want to say thank you again, Jonathan. It exceeded my expectations. It's really
Good
good.
job.
It was very
Thank you
good.
Very
so
good.
much.
Nice job.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for coming, and we'll just keep sending you information on our Thursday blasts of what's coming up next. So have a good week. Stay warm. Spring is going to return this weekend, we hope.
Right.
Thanks,
Thursday's gonna
everybody.
be nice.
Thank you. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Jonathan. Take
Thanks,
care. Good
Jonathan.
night, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Right.